Namaste everyone. So welcome to this series of Nakshatra videos. Today we are going to talk about Jyeshta Nakshatra, ruled by Indra, who is actually the king of gods and king of heavens in Vedic tradition. Now, as you can imagine, since this is the lunar mansion that is ruled by the very king of gods himself, this is naturally going to be nakshatra that has very high standards, that is always all about reaching the highest peak of achievement, which is why it's even called Jyeshta, which means either the eldest or the chiefmost. Now, since Jyeshta Nakshatra is all about, rising high and keeping this very high standard, which Indra within us represents, of course, naturally, this nakshatra is known as nakshatra of perfectionists. And usually that is the most recognizable trait of all natives who have pretty much any planet dwelling in Jyeshta Nakshatra. Of course, every planet dwelling there will manifest slightly differently and will show this strive for perfection in different areas of life. But indeed, Jyeshta Nakshatra natives, they have very keen eye for detail. They always want to perfect everything in their life. They want it to be the best. And this is why very often natives with strong placements in Jyeshta Nakshatra, indeed, they are very successful in life. They reach high positions, similar to Indra. They really achieve something remarkable very often. But at the same time, as you can imagine, this constant focus on perfection can also be very conducive to negative thinking sometimes. Because the more you focus on perfection, naturally, the more you will focus on imperfections as well. Because that's what is required for us to perfect anything. We need to firstly see where is the mistake, where is the problem, where is something imperfect, something to improve. And only once we see that, we can actually improve it. That's why the shadow side of Jyeshta Nakshatra is that these natives have this increased tendency not to just focus on negative side of things, but even to fixate themselves on it to the extent that they lose peace of mind. It's like my Gurudev always says this story about a teacher who gave to all the students a piece of paper, and then the teacher said to the students, please put one black dot in the center of that piece of paper. And then he asked them all, what do you see? Of course, all students replied, well, I see a black dot. And then the teacher told them, well, you see the black dot, you focus on the black dot, but it's so small and the white paper is so huge. None of you say that you actually see the white paper, you just focus on the dot. It's natural. Our human mind is like this, that when something is off the norm, if something is off, we focus more on it. We try to improve it. But for Jyeshta natives, this quality, this tendency is sometimes quite strongly amplified to the extent of their peace of mind being really affected by it. Now, naturally, since Jyeshta Nakshatra is ruled by Indra, the very king of gods who holds the highest position, one of other key traits of Jyeshta natives is ambition, of course. The ambition to always rise higher, not to just improve things, but to reach higher positions, to excel higher, to go beyond the limits. The very Shakti or power of Jyeshta Nakshatra is called Arohana Shakti, which means the power to rise and arise and keep rising higher and higher. But again, this strive for ambition sometimes causes in the life of Jyeshta natives lots of unnecessary and self-induced stress and pressure. Because Jyeshta natives tend to have so high expectations from themselves, and their inner critic is so powerful that sometimes it really takes unnecessarily a lot of peace of mind away from them. So as much as this ambition, as this drive, continuous drive towards self-improvement, is a very beautiful trait of that lunar mansion, at the same time, if not balanced, it really can take a lot of peace of mind away. Ultimately, remember that this is the last nakshatra, last lunar mention of sidereal Scorpio. And this is also one of the places where moon becomes debilitated. Jyeshta means chiefmost, and Indra is the leader of all the gods. And very often, especially when a cruel planet resides in Jyeshta Nakshatra, those natives have this natural authority, natural confidence, People naturally listen to them. They can be natural leaders too. And this is also something that normally comes to Jyeshta natives fairly easily. This is why these people do very well on managerial positions, and they can be very hardworking in those positions as well. They do very well also as teachers. Generally, Jyeshta natives usually find themselves most happy and most satisfied in types of careers when they can express themselves, when they have some authority, and where they can also continuously perfect themselves, and when they can continuously face new challenges. So it's not boring, so it's not the same all the time. The animal of Jyeshta Nakshatra is actually a rabbit, which is one of the fastest animals, but also one of the most sensitive ones and one of the most vigilant ones. In fact, rabbit is the only mammal that is being born with his eyes wide open, which is why in Egyptian culture, rabbit was also considered a symbol of enlightenment or illuminated self, which is also something that essentially Indra in the Vedas represents. But on a human level, of course, this interesting, vigilance of Jyeshta Nakshatra very often leads natives who have any placements in this lunar mansion to be hyper-vigilant. They will be more likely to see the threat or see the enemy even when there is no threat or enemy around them. They will be more likely startled. They will be more likely to develop also sensory sensitivities, quite similar to Ashlesha, another nakshatra of Mercury. Especially sound sensitivities, right? Because rabbits have those very, very big ears and they hear things so well. So, of course, Jyeshta natives, very similarly to Ashlesha again, are also very, very prone to develop sleeping disorders. Disorders related to nervous system not being able to just calm down, to reset, to calm down to baseline. There's this continuous, constant vigilance, continuous, constant expectation that something bad maybe is about to happen. And this is, of course, a little bit more common with cruel planets residing in Jyeshta Nakshatra. But even moon residing in Jyeshta sometimes may result in that. So especially for Jyeshta Nakshatra natives, it's incredibly important that they learn how to regulate their nervous system. So they can learn how after, of sensation of lots of stress, after the fight or flight response, so they know how to reset, how to calm down to baseline, to feel safe and balanced once again. This is an incredibly important thing, and I can't stress it enough, especially for this nakshatra, for this lunar mansion, because as I mentioned to you, it is a lunar mansion or nakshatra of perfectionists as well. And not surprisingly, there was quite recently done a really interesting research which shown that people who have this type of psychological trait of perfectionism, fixation on imperfections and mistakes, these are also the people who will more likely develop conditions like chronic pain. Because of course they will also focus on that pain, on that imperfection in their bodies and amplify it through their very thoughts. Chronic pain, chronic inflammations, autoimmune disorders. Jyeshta natives are all very prone to that, all because of this quality of potential fixation and hypervigilance that is existing inside of them. Which is why for Jyeshta natives it's so important that they learn how to regulate their nervous system, that they learn how to control their minds so that it doesn't start to negatively affect their well-being and their health. Now, this is another nakshatra of Mercury, which this time resides at the very end of sidereal Scorpio, which is original 8th house. And not surprisingly, of course, Jyeshta Nakshatra is strongly connected with overthinking. Indeed, Jyeshta natives are typical overthinkers. They not just think a lot, but they tend to overthink things. And if there's a retrograde planet dwelling in Jyeshta Nakshatra, that tendency will be even more amplified. Their inner dialogue is usually very active, and unfortunately, often it's not so positive. Often there's lots of self-criticism, self-judgment, also judgment and criticism towards others too. And whenever there is any problem, any issue that is out there in their lives that is not resolved, they really tend to lose peace of mind and fixate on themselves on that, and they don't gain peace until the issue is resolved. They keep thinking about it. They think about it when they're falling asleep. While they're sleeping, they're dreaming about it. They really try to resolve the issue, because please remember, Indra does not only represent the leader of gods, but he continuously, needed to be alert so the demons don't attack the heavens. He continuously, needed to watch out for the enemy, know what the enemy is doing. Which is why I often say, the Jyeshta natives, they are these typical warriors and kshatriyas, really. They have this trait of Indra inside of them. And when there are especially prolonged conflicts existing in their lives, this really wears them down, because their mind throughout this whole time is continuously active and continuously tries to reach a resolution. It's very hard for them to exist a situation without completion or without resolution. It's very hard for them to let go of the idea of trying, to change situation, improve it, and just let go of the control. Which, of course, in itself is not an easy task and requires for Jyeshta natives to engage more in practices like meditation, so they learn a little bit more in their life how to let go of these mental and, of course, also physical tensions. So they learn that they don't always need to fix things. Sometimes things just improve themselves with time. And sometimes we can't do anything to speed up this process. Now, since Jyeshta natives are overthinkers, there's one really good side to it too. And that is that Jyeshta just to get this one piece that they are looking for. Jyeshta is really good in that. Of course, sometimes they tend to dig too much to the extent that, again, it takes their peace of mind away. They forget to eat, they forget to and often towards improving things, that they spend a lot of their time researching those things that they are truly passionate about. And this is often also the secret of Jyeshta natives actually succeeding so often in whatever they are doing. Like I already mentioned to you, the very power behind Jyeshta Nakshatra, the Shakti of Jyeshta Nakshatra, is called Arohana Shakti. Now, Arohana literally means to arise, but this Sanskrit word is very often used in context of arising in battle, getting a little mobilized so that you can meet your enemy, getting prepared for a battle, getting prepared for some form of confrontation. And as you can imagine, Jyeshta natives, they are kind of always, prepared, for battle. They're always prepared for the worst, really, which is a little bit, how to say, it is the side of this lunar mansion that sometimes can be a little bit improved, because definitely they have this tendency to slide into negative thinking. But on the other hand, precisely because of this overthinking quality and because of the fact that before they do pretty much anything, they always rehearse it so many times and in their mind and physically, that it's true. Jyeshta natives very likely will be the first ones to be really truly prepared for the worst. And this is in a way amazing quality, because through that Jyeshta natives, they are always ready. And because of that, also, whenever they are, out there doing whatever they need to do, or facing, whichever type of confrontation, and even if something goes terribly wrong, very often they are ready for it. On the other hand, if the circumstances turn completely upside down, and when something happens in their environment that they could not predict, that they did not rehearse, they did not prepare themselves for, in other words, they had no control over, they then can really, explode, literally, because they can't handle it. They feel overwhelmed if they're not prepared for something. So confrontations is a very interesting side of Jyeshta Nakshatra. And unfortunately, because Jyeshta natives tend to focus so much on problems, on imperfections, and very often, it comes really from the space of good intentions. They try to give someone feedback, very often negative one, because they consider negative feedback of higher importance, naturally. Because of course, if something already went well, there's nothing to improve there, right? But if something didn't went well, if there's some mistake or a problem, often Jyeshta natives feel this almost irresistible urge to point it out, to show it to the person, so that the person may improve. And again, it often does truly come from the space of good intentions. But at the same time, precisely, because of that, Jyeshta natives may often end up in problems, in confrontations, and in conflicts with others. So of course, it's very, very important for you, if you have any strong placement in Jyeshta Nakshatra, firstly, to know when to speak, when is even the true necessity to speak about things. And if you truly, feel this urge, to bring one's attention to one's mistake, either try to, do it in more kind way sometimes, or try to give also some positive feedback along with that, because that's a very important thing. And this is also the thing that can sometimes help you avoid some unnecessary conflicts and confrontations. Now, of course, because Jyeshta Nakshatra has such a fierce, mobilized energy with Arohana Shakti as its power, with Indra as its deity, Jyeshta Nakshatra can be also quite aggressive. Even in one's actions, these are the type of natives who, when they're truly passionate about something, they will not rest until they get something done. So they can express, also this healthy aggression sometimes, but unfortunately, also Jyeshta natives very often suffer from unhealthy aggression and unhealthy anger, which becomes toxic as well. This is actually one of the most key shadow traits of Jyeshta Nakshatra, is that sometimes, because of so many emotions and sensations pent up inside of them, because of their natural sensitivity, and because of this natural, mobilization or vigilance that they are experiencing, sometimes, it is like that they have these outbursts of anger happening. So learning how to deal with their anger, not just to regulate it, but how to express it in a healthy way, is a very important life lesson for Jyeshta natives. And of course, not surprisingly, and please don't take it too literally if you have placements in Jyeshta Nakshatra yourself. But it is interesting that, even if you would look at the charts of very famous serial killers out there, so many, Jyeshta placements you will find out there. It's natural, because Jyeshta can be indeed very, very impulsive. Look how impulsive Indra himself was. Whenever, he would even see a possibility of enmity, he would attack immediately, sometimes without even checking the facts. And very often Indra would regret it later on. And similarly, it happens sometimes to Jyeshta natives. They react too quickly, too impulsively, and they may regret that later. And since this is nakshatra ruled by Mercury, in most cases, this is primarily being expressed through the power of word, of speech. They can sometimes really speak hurtful words to others before they even have time to reflect on that and regret it later. So, of course, this is one of the key qualities for all Jyeshta natives to learn gradually how to improve, to be less reactive. But that, of course, comes down to the same thing that we already talked about, and this is just the regulation of nervous system. Now, one of the reasons why Jyeshta Nakshatra can be so reactive sometimes or prone to explosions, because Jyeshta Nakshatra, as it dwells entirely in the sign of Scorpio, can also have quite a bit of tendency of self-suppression, of suppressing one's feelings and emotions. But it suppresses them in an interesting way, I would say. It does not naturally suppress the emotions which are very empowering in nature. Like anger can be incredibly empowering, right? Feelings and emotions that Jyeshta natives often feel very uncomfortable about are the ones that make them feel invulnerable. Insecurity, fear, sadness, hurt, grief, shame. Because again, think of Indra, the king of heavens. His duty is to always project power. That's how he stays in control, by putting this big shield around himself and projecting power around, right? He can't just allow himself to sit down and cry, because then all other gods in heavens will sit down and cry with him. So for Jyeshta natives, it often is like this too. Sometimes because of their position, they actually cannot allow themselves to immediately express their emotions. And they often end up postponing feeling those vulnerable feelings indefinitely, to the extent that there is a lot of suppression going on inside of them. A lot of continuous and prolonged and chronic suppression of certain sensations or feelings that are less welcome. And because of that, also, Jyeshta natives may be so much more prone to actually, really just explosions or anger or these uncontrollable emotions. Because it is like that, like if you imagine that your emotional state is like on scale 0 to 10, and let's say on 0, you are at your baseline, not overwhelmed at all. At 10, you're the most overwhelmed. What Jyeshta natives usually do is they keep pushing and pushing and pushing all the way when the scale goes to 9. While they should have already reacted and potentially rested and withdrawn a little when the scale was at 5 or 6. But since they keep pushing until it goes to 9, then from there it's so easy to go to 10, and then you can't take it anymore. So it's very important for Jyeshta natives to learn a little bit more about their emotional regulation, so that they can notice and react and tend to their even very uncomfortable feelings when they appear quicker. Like that, they can very easily avoid any unnecessarily, emotional explosions. Now, have you ever heard of the term control freak? Of course, sometimes Jyeshta natives may hear that others call them that way. Because indeed, having control over things and having some amount of predictability in life is incredibly important for Jyeshta natives. Without, having a sense that they are in control of the situation, that they are prepared for the situation, they often start feeling, very insecure. They start feeling almost scared and very stressed out. They highly dislike these unpredictable circumstances, which is really ironic because Scorpio is the original 8th house, which is literally, the place where the most unpredictable things happen. So Jyeshta is this nakshatra that always tries to contain chaos, make sense out of chaos, and predict chaos as well. But because of that, very often you will notice that especially in like really chaotic situations, Jyeshta natives will have this tendency to lose it, more frequently. Because when they feel that they're not in control, when they feel that they can't do anything about situation around them, they start feeling very insecure. Sensitivity is one quality that perhaps you would not attribute to Jyeshta Nakshatra. And if you yourself don't have any placement there, of course, I understand that you wouldn't. Because, as I mentioned to you, Jyeshta Nakshatra, these are born warriors, born kshatriyas. They love to project power and control and confidence around them because it makes them feel good. But actually, underneath, all that huge shield that they build around themselves, very often there is enormous sensitivity. Jyeshta natives are incredibly sensitive, both when it comes to their hearts, to their minds, to their bodies, and to their senses. Like I mentioned to you, Jyeshta natives very often are so prone to developing sensory sensitivities. And precisely because of that, they often may feel a little vigilant or a little more stressed because they notice, so much more sensory information than others, usually, which can be, by the way, amazing in some professions, like musicians. But because they notice, so much more information and their nervous system needs to process so much information all the time, this is precisely why they are also, so much more prone to just snapping, to getting explosive and impulsive. Because it's like their system is continuously overloaded, which gets additionally amplified, of course, by their own overthinking. So when it comes to that sensitivity aspect, Jyeshta Nakshatra really has this in common with Ashlesha, which is another nakshatra of Mercury. And precisely because of that, these two nakshatras are often quite misunderstood, really. And people often think that these people even are insensitive sometimes. Well, in reality, they are too sensitive and they just shield themselves. They sometimes need to disassociate, need to protect themselves just so they're not too overwhelmed. Now, because Jyeshta natives are such deep thinkers and they are so much into research, very often Jyeshta natives end up getting really interested and fascinated by spirituality. After all, Jyeshta Nakshatra dwells entirely in the sign of Scorpio, which is, the sign of going really deep, into this dark hole of your subconscious mind, meeting your demons, meeting your shadows, and defeating them like Indra. And this continuous self-improvement. So this continuous strive towards self-improvement naturally also leads those natives on spiritual path. And this usually begins firstly through occult sciences. So many people who have Jyeshta Nakshatra, they love astrology and Vedic astrology. Why? Because astrology in particular is such a spiritual science that gives you some insight into the future, that makes chaos looks more predictable, that makes it almost feel as if you can control it, even though it can be only the illusion. But even that sort of illusion of control can be sometimes very soothing for Jyeshta natives, can make them feel that they have some agency over their destiny, can make them feel that they understand what's coming next, and it makes them feel more calm. Which is why so many people with displacement, they come to Vedic astrology eventually, and it can be very, very helpful for them on their spiritual journey too. So as you could have seen, There is a lot of complexity to Jyeshta Nakshatra, as there is also a lot of complexity to Indra himself. Such a fascinating character who in the Vedas was praised as the bringer of illumination and perfection. But then, as you can see, in Kali Yuga, the very image of Indra deteriorates and he starts manifesting his shadow sides. He starts acting like control freak, literally. He starts making very bad decisions impulsively. Similarly, if you have a key placement in Jyeshta Nakshatra, remember that this Indra also resides in you, both his shadow sides, but also his bright and beautiful sides. And there's so much beauty out there in Jyeshta Nakshatra that also can come forth through you. So I hope you enjoyed this video. And if you wish to learn more about Jyeshta Nakshatra or any nakshatra, in the link below you can check out my website. You'll find there the Nakshatra course and plenty other courses at this point as well. And also there is a specific module dedicated to Jyeshta Nakshatra. So thank you for staying with me and see you next time. Namaste.